The election is being rigged by corrupt media, pushing completely false allegations and outright lies. The election is being rigged by corrupt media, pushing false allegations and outright lies. The process is rigged. It's a rigged election. It's a rigged system. And they take these lies and they put them on front pages. And I said, this system is rigged.
I'll tell you what. I think what he did was a fraud. That's thousands of votes that were taken away, which, by the way, would have given me, in my opinion, would have given me the election.
The Republican system is a rigged system, and so is the Democrat system, by the way. The investigation of Hillary Clinton was rigged. John Podesta rigged the polls. We are in a rigged system. And a big part of the rigging are these dishonest people in the media. Remember, folks, it's a rigged system. Just remember it. It's a rigged system. It's a rigged system. Don't ever forget it. The only way we're going to lose this election is if the election is rigged. Remember that. It's the only way we're going to lose this election. This is going to be a fraud like you've never seen. Did you see what's going on? Take a look at West Virginia. Mailmen selling the ballots. They're being sold. They're being dumped in rivers. This is a horrible thing for our country. This is not going to end well.
Mr. Trump decided even before the election that regardless of the facts and the truth, if he lost the election, he would claim it was rigged. Mr. Schierwald, I'd like you to explain a term that was thrown around a lot during the election, and that's the so-called red mirage. What does that mean?
So in the 40 or 50 years, let's say, that Americans have increasingly chosen to vote by mail or early or absentee, Democrats prefer that method of voting more than Republicans do. So basically, in every election, Republicans win Election Day and Democrats win the early vote. And then you wait and start counting, and it depends on which ones you count first, but usually it's Election Day votes that get counted first. And you see the Republicans shoot ahead, and then the process of bailing and binding and unbinding all those mail-in votes. So in every election, certainly a national election, you expect to see the Republican with a lead, but it's not really a lead.
So this red mirage, that's really what you expected to happen on election night.
Happens every time.
And here is the fear, and I hope everybody hears that. It could well be, and I don't know what's going to happen, nobody does, but it could well be that at 10 o'clock on election night, Trump is winning in Michigan, he's winning in Pennsylvania, he's winning in Wisconsin, and he gets on the television, he says, "Thank you, Americans, for re-electing me. It's all over. Have a good day." But then the next day and the day following, all of those mail-in ballots start getting counted, and it turns out that Biden has won those states. At which point Trump says, "See, I told you the whole thing was fraudulent. I told you those mail-in ballots were crooked, and we're not going to leave office." So that is a worry that I and a lot of people have.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. We did win this election. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list.
Right out of the box on election night, the president claimed that there was major fraud underway. I mean, this happened, as far as I could tell, before there was actually any potential of looking at evidence. And it seemed to be based on the dynamic that at the end of the evening, a lot of Democratic votes came in, which changed the vote counts in certain states. And that seemed to be the basis for this broad claim that there was major fraud. And I didn't think much of that because people had been talking for weeks and everyone understood for weeks that that was going to be what happened on election night.
We also, if you look and you see Arizona, we have a lot of life in that. And somebody declared that it was a victory for, and maybe it will be. I mean, that's possible. The gentleman that called it, I watched tonight, he said, well, we think it's fairly unlikely that he could catch. Well, fairly unlikely.
Mr. Stirewalt, you were at the decision desk at Fox News on election night, and you called Arizona early for President Biden, which was controversial. How did you make that call, and where did you think the race stood in the early hours of the next day?
Well, it was really controversial to our competitors who we beat so badly by making the correct call first. Our decision desk was the best in the business, and I was very proud to be a part of it. Because we had partnered with the Associated Press and the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago, so we had a different set of data than our competitors did. We had more research, and we had a better system, and we had a great team. And let me tell you, our poll in Arizona was beautiful, and it was doing just what we wanted it to do, and it was cooking up just right. And at some point, and I forget exactly who, but at some point it became clear that Arizona was getting ready to make a call. So my boss, Bill Salmon, said, we're not making any call until everybody says yes, because that was always our policy, unanimity. And you have to understand, in this room, you have, the best people from academia, Democrats, Republicans, a broad cross-section of people who had worked together for a decade, who are really serious about this stuff. So we were able to make the call early. We were able to beat the competition. We looked around the room, everybody says yay, and on we go. And by the time we found out how much everybody was freaking out and losing their minds over this call, we were already trying to call the next state. We had already moved on. We were to Georgia, we were to North Carolina, we were looking at these other states. So we thought we were pleased, but not surprised.
I see.
This is an email. It's two emails, actually. The first is from Alex Cannon to you and Faith McPherson. And then you forward that email on to Mark Meadows, Justin Clark, and Jason Miller, the subject being AZ Federal ID Voters. If you look at the original email there, it says, Bill, we completed the AZ analysis you requested. I assume that's about Arizona. And because of the substantial uncertainty surrounding the databases, this is a highly unreliable way to identify ineligible voters. Can you explain the task that you gave to Ms. Cannon for this Arizona analysis?
Sure. Previously, I described some of my frustration with some of the claims that people would throw at President Trump regarding, need to look at this, this happened in this state or that happened in that state. And it would be, those would flow to us to look into. I talked about that before, I think.
Yep.
This is an example of that. I recall in Arizona, someone had thrown out, I believe this to be the claim, that there were thousands of illegal citizens, people not eligible to vote, having cast their ballots in Arizona. Someone had thrown out that claim to President Trump. The reality of that was not illegal citizens voting in the election. I think it was like overseas voters voting in the election. So obviously, people who were eligible to vote.
It can set and run an algorithm that probably ran all over the country to take a certain percentage of votes from President Trump and flip them to President Biden, which we might never have uncovered had the votes for President Trump not been so overwhelming in so many of these states that it broke the algorithm.
I remember that one of the things Mark said at some point was, you can't show an actual vote was flipped, which I found at the time to be a remarkable assertion, because
Even Sidney Powell, defending herself in a defamation lawsuit brought by Dominion Voting Systems, argued that, quote, no reasonable person would conclude that her statements were truly statements of fact.
We had a report that the heads of Dominion and Smartmatic, somewhere in the mid-teens, 2013, 14, whatever, went down to Venezuela for a get-to-know meeting with Maduro so they could demonstrate to Maduro the kind of vote fixing they did for Chavez.
You say the heads of Dominion and Smartmatic?
Yes, that's what I was told. Before the press conference, I was told about it. Sometimes I go and look myself online when stuff comes up. This time I didn't have the time to do it. They saw a big truck bringing in 100,000 ballots in garbage cans, in waste paper baskets, in cardboard boxes, and in shopping baskets. And every single one of them was for Biden, because they were being notified by Smartmatic in Frankfurt that Biden was way behind and they better come up with a lot more ballots. And we can prove every single thing I just said.
What they were proposing, I thought was nuts. And the theory was also completely nuts, right? I mean, it was a combination of Italians, Germans. I mean, different things have been floating around as to who was involved. I remember Hugo Chavez and the Venezuelan. She has an affidavit from somebody who says they wrote a software in and something with the Philippines, and just all over the radar.
The general consensus was that the law firms were not comfortable making the arguments that Rudy Giuliani was making publicly. I seem to recall that I had a similar conversation with most all of them.
I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bullshit. And, I didn't want to be a part of it, and that's one of the reasons that went into me deciding to leave when I did.